I sent you back a reply.
Just the DPRs, whatever.
Thanks a lot. UVA.
Good morning, everyone. The time is now 9:31. I just want to let everyone know we are still waiting for a quorum. So just sit back, relax, and hopefully we'll get started soon.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
All right, good morning again, everyone. The time is now 9:37, and we are going to get started knowing that we do have folks on their way. Since we have a lot of important guests here with us, and going to start out with reports that do not take any action at this time. I'm calling the meeting to order and ask for a roll call at this time.
Chair Jacobs,
Here.
Vice Chair Baker,
Here.
Councilmember Caballero, Planning Commissioner Chagaris, Commissioner Lee, Mayor Pro Tem Middleton. Just got promoted.
And I would like ask for an excused absence for him. We'll have to vote on that
Commissioner
later.
Valentine,
Yeah, that will take a vote. Okay.
Commissioner Valentine,
Thank you. Are there any adjustments to the agenda? Oh, we can't do that. We can't vote on that. Okay. Announcements. Any announcements? We can't vote on the minutes, so we'll come back to that. Any city county manager priority items?
The city does not have any priority items. I do want to take a point of personal privilege to introduce this city attorney's office extern that we have this year. Darius, would you mind standing up? We have Darius Baker, a 3L from UNC. He'll be with us for, I think, through May. Is that right? Through May.
Awesome. Welcome.
No
Okay.
county priority items, ma'am.
Thank you. So first we'll move to item 5, 2024 Board of Adjustment Annual Report. And Leah Larkins.
Good morning. My name is Leah Larkins. I'm a senior planner in the planning department, and I serve as the staff liaison to the Board of Adjustment. I'm here to introduce our chair, Chad Meadows. He's been serving as chair for several years now, and he is going to present the report with me here as support.
Yeah. Morning, Madam Chair, Commission members. I'm Chad Meadows. I'll be for you today. Nice to be on this side of the podium. I often have fun with folks who are trying to do the whatever. So it's my pleasure to chair the Board of Adjustment. Thanks for having me. I wanted to give you our 2024 report. 9 minor special use permits, all of which were approved. We had 15 variance requests. 10 of those were approved. We had 1 reasonable accommodation, which we approved, and 1 appeal, which we denied. So while we had more cases, or we heard more cases in 2023, we actually prepared for more cases in 2024. In 23, we heard 39 cases. We prepared for 44. In 2024, we heard 26 cases, but we actually prepared for 49. So we actually had more cases in 24. Sort of interesting. I'll note that we are becoming more discerning and I hope improving in our application of the standards. For example, we had 5 cases withdrawn in 2024. None were withdrawn in 2023. We had 18 cases continued in 2024. We only had 5 continued in 2023. And I think the explanation for that is we're having more discussion amongst ourselves and more discussion with the applicants, which is leading to continuance and coming back with a better application. We did deny 5 cases in 2024. We denied 4 in 2023. We're still getting the same number of cases generally, but more withdrawals and continuations. One thing of note, in 2024, the month of June had no cases, which is the first time in my memory, and I've been on the board for a while now, so that was sort of interesting. Never seen that before. Couple other things to report on. We added a November meeting in 2024, so we're now having 12 meetings a year. We updated our bylaws in 2024. One last thing I will request, we have just absolutely fantastic members on the Board of Adjustment, just amazing people. Very, very sadly, we've had a recent departure, what with the call back to work for federal employees. We have lost our lone female and our lone person of color, and we would ask very, very much in y'all's deliberations and considerations of applicants, if you could look for and bring to us more females and more persons of color to our board, we would very much appreciate that. Let me talk about attendance for a moment. We were bad children in 2024, and I'll take the blame for some of that. We had 4 people who were under the 75% threshold. 2 have since resigned. 1 is brand new, and 1 is me. Long story about that, but I'll note that we did have a meeting in November, and if you count the November meeting, which was a training session, I actually do cross the 75% threshold, but I have been chastised and punished by staff. I throw myself on your mercy. I'll also mention we've had our 1 resignation of our federal employee who has left us, but we've added another alternate. So we remain down. We're still, at about 9 people, 8, 9 people. So we have some space, and we would love to have some new folks join us. And that's the extent of my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you so much, Chad, and thank you for your long time service on this board. This is one of those boards that is a lot of work. Recognize that, a lot of time and work, and really important. So thank you. Maybe we can have a little discussion about recruitment, because there's other boards I think that's a relevant conversation with. We will not chastise you for your attendance.
Thank you.
And I appreciate what you said about how you're doing some things differently and seeing some differing results. I think that was really interesting in the report. I had a question, I think maybe for you, Sarah. I think when we talked about the UDO rewrite, that there was some conversation about making some changes that may end up having less burden on the Board of Adjustment. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, one of the things that we have talked about doing is right-sizing the types of approvals. The Board of Adjustment, particularly in terms of use permits, I think is where we have heard a lot of equity concerns from community members. And so that is one of the things that we are looking at, what really should be a use permit versus not a use permit, what things really should be legislative decisions, so that there is more freedom for folks to be able just to voice their opinions and concerns without having to have this quasi-judicial burden of proof that they have to succumb. So that we are still looking at that. So that might change the workload of the board eventually. But I'm sure that they will continue to do a great job at whatever they do.
Thank you. Staff has been actively involving us and working with us on our suggestions for UDO rewrites, and we really, really appreciate that. It's nice to be heard and to be valued.
Fantastic. Any other comments?
I'll just add to that. Yeah, I really appreciate all of the work that you all are doing and the work that you've done and the presentation that you gave, discussion about the additional, the growing discernment of cases. I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And I've spoken with members of the board, and I do think that they're very good. And yeah, we should have that conversation about ensuring that the diversity of the board is more representative of the population of Durham. I think that'd be good. And you asked the question that I was going to ask, and I would love to think about the Planning Commission potentially playing a bigger role in making actual decisions, not just recommendations, if that's a place where we can push some of these, some of these discretionary decisions and reduce the laborious process of the quasi-judicial proceeding. So thank you so much.
Thanks again.
Thank you very much.
Okay, next we have a report from the Planning Commission. Aaron Kane, Senior Planning Manager.
There we go. Oh, thank you. Usually people don't have to tell me I'm not loud enough. Aaron Kane with the Planning Department, here with Vice Chair Shigeris, who's sitting at the table. To talk about the planning commission, you heard from me enough, so I'll be very quick and I'll be happy to answer any questions if you have them. We had 51 zoning cases in 2024, which was an increase, but we did have a decrease in the number of text amendments that we saw. So overall, the workload in terms of the number of cases was about equal. The one thing I would like to point out, and we could really use y'all's help on, is similar to Board of Adjustment recruitment and filling up our roster, so to speak. We are currently down to 10 members, and we always have an absence or two. And Councilmember Baker, as you're very much aware, the quorum is set at 8. It is not 50% plus 1 of the current membership. It is a minimum of 8. When you only have 10 on the roster, that makes getting a quorum sometimes a bit dicey. And it has been of recent. We have 2 vacancies. One has recently been filled, but my understanding is she has not yet filled out taken the oath and filled out her paperwork, but hopefully she will by next week. So we can get that position filled. We have 1 more vacancy with the city, and we have 2 with the county. So I'd ask you to, if there's any way that you can expedite that process, I'll also coordinate with the clerk's offices to make sure we try to get those filled. With that, I'll leave it to y'all if you have any questions.
Thank you. I think similar. Well, I was going to wait until we're done to talk about the recruitment. So
Okay.
thank you.
Mhm.
Could you explain what direct translational zoning, when you said the 11
Mhm.
cases?
Sure, and this is based on relatively recent state law. Previously, if you were asking to annex into the city from the county jurisdiction, but you were not looking to change the underlying zoning. Let's say I've got 5 acres, it's zoned RS20. I want to annex into the city so that I can get water and sewer and put a few more houses on there. That is what we call direct translational zoning. You're not asking to change the zoning to a PDR or a CN or anything like that. You're just wanting to keep the zoning, but you're asking to annex. We call that a direct translational zoning. Previously, those used to bypass the planning commission and they went straight to city council because the underlying zoning wasn't changing. However, and Aaron can probably speak to this better than I can, but my understanding is there's recent state law that says that even if the underlying zoning is the changing, because it's going into the city, that is technically a new zoning that's being applied. And so therefore the planning commission must review it. When we brought the first couple of cases to the planning commission, Vice Chair Shigaris knows, it's like, what are we doing here? You're not actually changing anything. You're just going into the city. But I think we've had a few cases now and people are getting the hang of it and they tend to go pretty quickly at the planning commission.
Thank you. Look at my notes here. I think that's it. And I just wanted to ask Vice Chair Shigaris if you wanted to add anything from the report or just your work.
I just want to support Aaron Kane in the fact of the turnover rate. And we need the new positions filled, with qualified, diversified personnel as quick as possible. I don't have any idea what the applications look like. And additionally, in June, in a couple months, 3 experienced members of the commission, their terms are also up. And so that's going to be 3 more positions to fill. So.
Thank you, Aaron. The Planning Commission is a very special place in my heart. And I appreciate all the work that's being done. I think the planning commissioners are amazing. The comments they provide are so helpful, just incredibly helpful. Well, just one quick question. For quorum, is that just in the rules of procedure or is that embedded somewhere else? Could we update because it is just this planning commission is huge. And it seems that there is always this issue of turnover. It's just inherent in the size of the planning commission because it's unusually large. Most planning commissions are like 5. So is that something that's worth exploring?
So it is in the rules of procedure, but I believe that is taken from the interlocal agreement,
it.
right?
Okay. More
And
complex.
my speculation is the reason for that is if you have a seven are appointed by the city and seven are appointed by the county. So if you have a quorum of 8, there has to be some representative. You couldn't have all city or all county representing the entire planning commission.
Yeah, it's in the interlocal agreement. Okay, thank you.
Yes, and I just want to echo also a former planning commissioner, how important the planning commission is. And unfortunately, we don't get to benefit from the work of the planning commission as much on the county commission, but I agree. I always rely on the input and the comments and the expertise. So yeah, thank you. Okay, thank you. Next, we have the 2024 Durham Open Space and Trails Annual Report. Carl Kalasna, Senior Planner.
Hello, everyone. Carl Kalasna. So I'm the staff liaison to the Durham Open Space and Trails Commission, also known as DOST. I believe this is my 5th year doing it, so it's been a little while. The chair of DOST, I believe, is in the Bahamas right now. They're somewhere very nice and warm. But I have the vice chair here, Lucan, who's going to give us a little update, and then here, happy to answer any questions. So I'll just keep it brief and hand it over to Deborah.
Yeah, good morning. You have a copy of our annual report, so I wanted to just touch on a few areas that I thought were particularly important. One of them is the Trails Tour that we do every year for elected officials to kind of showcase some of the different open spaces in our portfolio, the history, the challenges, the successes. I really like this because, you can read about it, but it's really different to see it in person. The second thing is the matching grants program. It's a streamlined way for us to encourage small nonprofits to develop outdoor recreation for their communities. It's a relatively small amount of money, but it makes a big difference. So I think that's a really important thing that we do. The third thing is that we spent a fair amount of time trying to coordinate with other boards, other commissions, other agencies. We have liaisons with BPAC and the Farmland Board. We've got people from Ellerby Creek on some of our committees. This is really important because it's important to identify areas where we have common interests and find synergies. So we're all not just reinventing the wheel all the time. I'd like to spend a few minutes just talking about what we see coming up in 2025, in addition to these things that we tend to do every year. So one of them is the UDO, analyzing the draft UDO, working with planning and Carl has been really is a great resource for that, to see where we need to make modifications to ensure that Durham's open space portfolio is protected in the future. So that'll be a big thing coming up this year. Another thing is that we are actively participating in advisory groups, planning groups for a lot of the new properties that are coming available in Durham County. For example, the Durham to Roxborough Rail Trail is something it's really dear to my heart coming from Bahama. So that's like right in our wheelhouse. So I anticipate that being something we will be working on this year. In addition, the second phase of the farm campus, where there's sort of recreational opportunities to make that connection between county land, TLC land, and the city park. I think that would be a great opportunity. The new park on Santee Road. I know we have people interested in open space, preserving open space and new developments. So we've got a lot of stuff going on. And a lot of stuff I don't even know about yet that will come up in the next year. Remember, we welcome your requests, your opinions, your suggestions of things we should look at. So lastly, I would like to thank you for supporting DOST and ask if you have any requests you would like me to take back to DOST or questions that I can try to answer or take back to the commission.
Well, thank you so much for your report and also your passion and enthusiasm for this work, which is very evident.
Mhm.
And DOS is another really important commission that really helps us do the work in Durham city and county government. So thank you. I had a few questions about the what you listed as the 2024-2025 goals. If you could tell us a little bit more about the open space report card, and also the funding advocacy committee, what that really has ended up being like, especially you was highlighted the issue about land that we became aware of with doing the comp plan that is not actually protected, that the city has, that really needs to be officially protected. And the other thing that I had really jumped out at me was your idea about engaging the public in visiting a lot of the resources that we actually have, trails and parks and things, because I think one of the benefits of COVID was that, excuse me, people in our community got outside and discovered a lot of resources that we have. But sometimes it can be intimidating for people. And if it's an organized activity or something, especially if you're alone, a single person, you can feel safer or more comfortable doing that. So I was really interested in that initiative.
Yeah, I think we've only had one of those activities yet. So we're going to have and that was just like last month. So that's sort of a new thing we're trying, making sure we have the time to do it. The report card was an initiative in one of our committees. I think Jane Forrest has been actively volunteering to help us with that. It's a way to look at new developments and kind of, in a semi-quantitative way, evaluate, is the open space going to be protected? Is it sufficient? Should we make comments on it? So it's kind of a new thing we've started this year, and we'll see how it goes this coming year. I think we'll be able to put it into practice. And what else was
The
it?
funding advocacy.
Oh, the funding
committee
advocacy committee just started up. I'm not even sure we've had a meeting yet, but it's a temporary committee. So again, something we're testing out this year that we haven't had before. So I'll have to report on that next year, the results.
Yeah. And would the report card be something how would that be actually used? Who would that be shared with?
Yeah, I can share it. So DOS has actually done its first. So this is in the context of the primarily rezoning application. So the format is a memo that's sent to either the Planning Commission and then the City Council or whatever, whichever side is going to be doing it. So I think DOS sent their first one out on the Mariah Ridge rezoning that was just decided by City Council recently. They sent a memo to the Planning Commission ahead of that. So that's functionally how it's going to be operationalized, and DOS is figuring out how to screen the many rezonings that are coming through to figure out which ones they should take a closer look at and put a memo together with their recommendations in it.
Thank you. And I want to welcome City Council Member Caballero. I think we now have quorum.
Sorry.
Thank you. Oh, no, we're fine. We've
Okay,
been doing
good. Oh, Lord.
reports.
I did.
Hey,
I
you're
did-
here.
Yeah, thank you. I said I was going to be late. I do also want to make sure that Mayor Pro Tem Middleton gets an excused absence.
Yes.
Thank you.
Now that you're here, we can vote on that. Any other comments or questions?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you so much. I think, Carl, you're doing a great job staffing this committee. I appreciate, and I'm a liaison, so I don't have too many questions because I get to sit in on these meetings, but I appreciate the emphasis on working collaboratively with other boards and committees, because obviously there's a lot of overlap with Parks and Recreation, Environmental Affairs Board, Planning Commission, BPAC. I mean, there's a lot of shared interests there and a lot of potential collaboration. And in being the liaison to DOST, I see the enthusiasm. We can see the hard work that's going in here. It's very focused. We have clear goals, 30% of the county, we want that to be open space. So that's a very clear goal. And then of course we want to make sure that all residents in Durham have geographic physical access to high quality open space. And I think that there's a lot of work that's going into making that a reality. So I really appreciate all of the work that you all are doing. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, go ahead.
I recently had a comment by Commissioner Cutright at one of the Planning Commission meetings about, he asked me, he goes, well, you don't have kids, or he has kids or whatever, about opportunities in Raleigh for children's learning and stuff like that. Is there any like plans or anything to make these open spaces and trails have like little, I don't know, little plaques, little learning stations so that young children could get out there and, I mean, if there's a plaque there that an adult can read, but, maybe something more targeted towards the young people and get them involved and stuff like that? Make
Yeah,
Durham
I
more
think so.
small
Yeah.
kid friendly?
Yeah, that's something I think our Parks and Rec folks who are doing the sort of programming and just gonna skip doing the parks trail are thinking about. I think particularly for the Rockborough Rail Trail, there's a lot of conversation and ideas about from murals and ways to understand the history and the heritage of the area to water stations to make sure that people are having water along the way, but also things like making sure there are things for children and other people to do. So I think that's definitely part of the conversation.
I really appreciate you bringing that up, having interpretation. I think it would be interesting to look at the relationship between open space and trails and our schools. Years ago, when I helped create the Hollow Rock Nature Park, one of the really important features of that was the relationship with Forest View Elementary School. And it was one of the goals of the school. I don't know what's happening now because that was a long time ago, but was around environmental education and physically getting kids from the school to New Hope Creek and they were doing art, music, water testing. I mean, the biggest thing was actually trying to not have the kids literally come back wet, But it was really important because a lot of the kids had literally never been in nature that way because they live in apartments and things like that. So I think thinking about those opportunities, to your point, I think is really important. I was going to ask about the status of the city open space planner because it's mentioned in the report that there wasn't one. Do we have one now?
No, my understanding is that there's sort of a restructuring in DPR and they're still working through the staffing of that and are hiring. I'd have to check with DPR to get the details of how that previously there was a position that was dedicated to it. And I'm sorry, I don't know the exact details since it's within DPR.
Okay.
But it's been open for a while.
Okay.
As well as the County Open Space Planner Commission is still open. So we're down a quarter of the county open space.
Really? Okay, I did not know that.
When Jane Corus left, that left a hole that hasn't been filled.
Okay, I'm glad to know that. I did not know that. Okay, well, we each need to follow up on that because these are really important positions. And it's also my understanding the city is now providing funding for open space like the county, which is fantastic. Because to your comment about all residents having access to open space, that means open space within the city. And we really do have a lot of potential to connect up open space within the city. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, next we have the Historic Preservation Commission Annual Report. And Carla Rosenberg. Looks like Carla.
So, good morning. To state the obvious, my name is not Carla Rosenberg. I'm Scott Whiteman. Carla could not be here this morning. Neither our chair is also out unexpectedly, and our vice chair couldn't come in to take her place here. So, I'm here for Carla Rosenberg, who is the staff liaison to the Historic Preservation Commission, here to present to you this year's annual report. The commission reviewed 17 major certificates of appropriateness, or COAs, during the CLG year. And for those of you who don't know, CLG stands for Certified Local Government, which is the certification we get from the state in order to administer our own historic preservation program, which has some additional requirements for annual reports, which piggyback on this annual report. The staff also reviewed 62 minor certificates of appropriateness. With the exception of 2 withdrawals, all were approved or approved with conditions. In its newsletter, the commission chose to highlight the growing trend of the accessory dwelling unit, featuring an exceptional example built on a landmark property at 504 Watt Street, known as the Crowell House. On the one hand, the historic districts are seeing a steady loss of contributing accessory structures that depict past ways of life and often match the architectural features of the primary structure. However, new ADUs are providing increased yet discrete density within these districts, potentially housing more families while still managing to preserve the historic appearance of the streetscape. One project that the commission also wanted to highlight this morning was the renovation of North Carolina Mutual, another local historic district landmark. The structure was originally coated with a stone aggregate that 60 years later showed significant deterioration to the point that falling debris had become a safety hazard for people on the ground. Staff and the commission worked with the property owner and their consultants to ultimately approve a water-resistant coating that would seal the existing aggregate to prevent further spalling. The resulting light beige color is also believed to be closer to its original hue. Besides COAs, the commission had the opportunity to review several National Register nominations this year, including nominations for Gear Cemetery, West End Cemetery's Historic District, and Harriet Tubman YWCA, as well as additional documentation for the St. Joseph's African Methodist Episcopal Church. The commission was pleased to recommend approval of each of these nominations, which have since been successfully added to the National Register. Finally, the HPC, in partnership with Preservation Durham, successfully applied for a 2024 CLG grant to complete an architectural survey and National Register nomination for Emerywood Estates, known as Durham's first predominantly African-American suburb. Staff will be working with the North Carolina Historic Preservation Office and the HPC to add this listing to the register, hopefully around June of 2025. So that concludes my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions or share any comments with our commission.
Thank you, Scott. You did a great job for Carla.
Well,
and the
luckily, she
commission.
wrote out all the things I was supposed to say.
Yeah, but yeah, sounds like really great work done this year. Again, really appreciate all of it. Any comments or questions from? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for that. And great work of the Historic Preservation Commission. I am interested and curious about the Durham School of the Arts buildings. And I spoke with a school board member informally the other day who mentioned that they are actually interested in pursuing protections for that property. I'm not aware of a process that's in place right now, but is there anything is that on the radar for folks in historic preservation? I know that you're.
Yeah, I could check with Carla if she's heard any rumblings about that. I don't believe, I know I have not heard any. I don't know if you've heard anything, Sarah. And I'm not sure if it's already listed on the National Register, but it could be listed as landmark if there's interest in that.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else? Well, thank you for raising that. That's a really good question, an important issue, and I will also follow up on that. I was curious about one of the comments in the report mentioned concern about the number of tear downs in the Fayetteville Street corridor, and also wanting to change the state statute around how long you could ask for kind of a delay for a tear down. Do you know anything about either of those issues?
Yeah, so the commission has expressed some concern where, if you didn't know, state law does not allow the city or county or an historic preservation commission to prohibit the demolition of a historic landmark or a structure in a historic district. The max that can be done, the commission can add up to a 365 day delay on the demolition, which is often a great deterrent for folks where time is money. But I think the commission has expressed concern that they've seen more folks, particularly in some of our higher dollar historic districts, I guess for lack of a better term, where folks are applying for a demolition and just sitting on the understanding that's going to have to be delayed 365 days and then just building that into their, financial model. And there's some thought on the commission that that is not enough of a deterrent anymore. But it would require a change in state law in order for the commission to have a delay longer than 365 days.
I wonder if there are any other strategies. I mean, one is maybe pulling together the community or trying to educate people about this, trying to work with property owners on it for other solutions. I don't know if any of those have been looked at, but.
Yeah, definitely. One of the purposes of the delay is for give folks time to work it out, and that has actually succeeded in some cases where, they've worked with the applicant has worked with neighbors and found a way to save some or all of the structure or found a different buyer who's willing to save it. So there are some of those strategies that are quite informal, but we don't have anything formally in place to do that.
And is Preservation Durham involved in those cases and trying to help those conversations or bringing people together?
That, I know Carla would know better how much involvement they have. I know they are involved some, but it kind of depends on the situation and the applicant.
All right. I think that's something that we should really stay on top of and look at what are some strategies around that. Thank you. Okay. Thanks so much. Next, we have the 2024 Durham City County Appearance Commission Annual Report, and Kayla Seibel.
Hi, good morning. My name is Kayla Seibel. I'm a senior planner at the Planning Department and staff liaison to the Appearance Commission. The Appearance Commission's mission is to cultivate visual appeal and recognize the good side, which enhance the quality of life for residents of the city and county of Durham. The report details the Commission's activities from this past year, as well as work since the interlocal cooperation agreement was renewed in 2023. Due to a number of challenges and changing roles and priorities over the past 25 years, staff and the Commission are actively involved in brainstorming about their future and hope to bring forward a joint recommendation on the future evolution of the Appearance Commission later this year. So in your packet, you have a report from the chair detailing the 2024 accomplishments. And Dan Harrop is the current chair of the Appearance Commission. He's here to provide more context or answer any questions. I can also answer any questions for you as well. Do you want to say anything?
Sure.
Okay.
Hey, everybody. I just wanted to say as Keller mentioned, we met with the sort of leadership at the planning department a couple of weeks ago to sort of work through some ideas and brainstorm some possibilities for transitioning the commission into something more of a task force or kind of maybe a more sort of loosely sort of affiliated group of citizens body, really. We have had some challenges, as Kayla mentioned, with regards to meeting quorum and sort of actively engaging those folks who are sort of on the commission, joining and sort of giving them sort of a sort of meaning and sort of really sort of engaging with them. It's been a little bit of a challenge, really, just as I'm sure many commissions have seen following kind of COVID, really, and getting everybody back together. As Kelly mentioned, there was some context there in your report. Can answer any questions or any thoughts added to that. I will say we kind of tried to set some smaller goals, if you like, last year, one of which being just having some sort of event or some sort of focus and engagement with the community, which we achieved through the Preservation Durham event, which we kind of sort of joined in on at a table there and sponsored the event. And it was really great. It was good to see the sort of community as one. I think what we also recognized there was that the community itself at large doesn't actually know, from the majority, doesn't actually know who or what the Appearance Commission is, what they do, what their mission is. So I think, again, that sort of plays into a little bit of that sort of, what is the commission, and can we sort of maybe change tack or sort of move forward in a slightly different way that perhaps is a little bit more flexible, a little bit more kind of able to pivot and kind of gets away from maybe some of the constraints that we've seen with quorum and the regulatory requirements that it currently has.
Well, thank you. And thank you, Dan, for being in this leadership position. I know it's hard when you're looking at the report, the challenges that you've all had. And so appreciate you stepping up in this role. Was there, and I noticed you all do have a new logo. So that was, that looks great. I guess from my experience over the past 12 years, I've always, what has been a big standout were the Bright Leaf Awards, which I now are called the Bull Cityscape. Yeah, what are they? What was it?
The Golden Leaf.
Golden
Yeah.
Leaf, Golden Leaf. So now I know the new name is the Bull Cityscape Awards. Was there any discussion about just focusing on that? And I mean, to your point about something that's not necessarily commission, but more just a task force that just has maybe one focus. Any discussion about
Yeah,
that?
I mean, I think as I mentioned, that was kind of really the goal for last year, and trying to collectively come together and kind of reinvigorate that, right? Because I know this, obviously, with as I said, with COVID, it kind of went away. What we really focused on last year, and with Preservation Durham, was a great sort of, I think, sort of dipping our toes in, was able to. We realized it was kind of hard for us to sort of recreate that from scratch, if you like. Even though there's some inherent and sort of institutional knowledge, a lot of that had gone with past members who've moved on from the commission. Obviously, we had Kayla's support, so we kind of knew there was still some there in the background from what had been done, from the city side. But I think with the Preservation Durham event, we figured we could try and utilize somebody else's event and use that sort of as a platform from which to move on from. And so that was the idea from last year, was let's get a new logo. Let's sort of figure out what the commission, sort of refigure out what the commission's trying to do, and then we'll be able to sort of use that as a springboard. I think from, and again, I think it really comes down to the fact that the folks that we've got on the commission, there's maybe 2 or 3 of us that are there every time. We've struggled to get quorum, so then we've struggled to sort of maneuver people, let's put it that way, who are not so engaged. And it's a small group, and it's, I mean, with it being a volunteer sort of thing, I think we've just struggled to really sort of figure out a way in which to, we can kind of make that happen again. I think it's a good idea. I think just having one goal, we kind of 2 years ago, we started out with some, let's do half a dozen things. We realized quickly that wasn't going to happen. We managed to do one thing last year, 2 things: get a new logo and be part of an event. So some minor successes there, but yeah, I think just sort of being very targeted and figuring out ways in which we can be a little bit more, less attenuated, I guess, than we maybe have been.
Well, if you're a task force or something, you might not have the quorum issues.
Well,
you can be more nimble.
Exactly. I think that's the thing. I mean, I think what we heard from leadership was, we could.
Aaron is looking at me like, no. Okay. Oh, yeah. Well, anyway, we look forward to hearing what you decide, working with the planning staff on maybe transitioning to another model. I mean, I think there's still a role for uplifting great things happening in our community around design. I mean, even something like looking at affordable housing, like how are people doing it well, ADUs, some of the things that we're really trying to prioritize in our community, and how do we lift those up and share them out and help support other people that are trying to do that. So thank you. Any comments or questions?
I'll just say, I appreciate the work that you all are doing, particularly the folks who are showing up consistently. And I hear you struggling through, what is the mission? What is the meaning? What are we here for? And I think, some groups, I think there's an opportunity to say, fold this into something else, or it's no longer necessary. I think this is really important. I think good placemaking, urban design, what we see when we walk down the street is incredibly important and increasingly important. And so I think there's a lot of value to this work. And so I just want you to know that I support whatever you all can struggle with and arrive at in terms of, the mission and what the work is that you'll be able to do. I think it's necessary and important. So just know that. And however we can, support you in that effort, I'd like for us to do that. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Just briefly, thank you so much for trying to stick it through. I look forward to whatever, if it gets moved as a subcommittee into another group potentially or something like that. I think that however y'all move forward and the folks who want to do the work, I hope that you have our support, and I know staff will work diligently. I always appreciate how much, I don't think folks realize how many planning staff are the liaisons to so many boards and commissions. So I also want to just lift up planning staff because I've served on several where it's been staffed with planning folks and they're always really good liaisons. And so I know that they'll work well with y'all to figure out what does this next iteration look like. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Okay, well, Nate just stepped out because I was going to have us vote on a few things. Oh, okay. Well, I'll wait. So we'll move on to the small area plan scoping report, and then we'll come back to some of the things we need to vote on.
I just wanted to make sure that was not an action item, that staff isn't looking for direction, and whether or not we need to wait for Councilmember Baker to return.
Okay.
The actual. Check the last
item. The one coming up, I just wanted to make sure that staff isn't looking for some sort of direction, where we'll need a quorum for a vote before you all get started, where we'll need to wait for Councilmember Baker to return for the small area scoping report. I just wanted to make sure before. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I don't think that we need formal direction. I think this is more of like a informational and what we're recommending, and we'll take comments and that will kind of inform some future decisions, but we're not looking for an action.
We'll proceed.
Is giving direction taking action? Oh, here he is. You can't leave. So it is giving direction taking action then? I'm trying to understand.
Yeah. Do you want to take it or you want me to do it?
I think we're in agreement that when you're asking for direction from the board is taking an informal action. People asking questions is one thing, but when you're asking the board to give direction, then presumably y'all are acting through some consensus. And that does seem to stray into that area. But now that Councilman Baker is back,
we're good.
Yeah.
You can go back, approve minutes, and press on.
Okay, well, before we move on to the next item, I would like to, first of all, entertain a motion to excuse Mayor Pro Tem Mark Anthony Middleton.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Baker, seconded by Councilmember Caballero. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And the motion is approved. Also, I would like to entertain a motion to approve the minutes from our January 8th, 2025 meeting.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Baker, seconded by Councilmember Caballero. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And the minutes are unanimously approved. I would also want to make sure, are there any adjustments to the agenda today? Okay. Seeing none, do we need to vote on approving the agenda? Okay. fine. Okay, so we are going to move on to, one thing, just we said at the end, we would talk about recruitment for boards and commissions. So we heard today, Board of Adjustment would like to have more women, people of color, they're down. Planning Commission, we need more city and county positions filled. We heard about Appearance Commission. Just want to open it up. Any ideas, strategies about recruiting for boards and commissions?
Just out of curiosity, so the council gets an annual report that the clerk's office does specifically around demographics, including income data. And so when there's a joint board that's city county, we don't see the county's information. So I wonder if, and when people apply, we only see the city seats. So we don't know the demographics on the county side. So that could be a way for folks to help diversify. Oh, I used a terrible word there. Our boards and commissions, because I think in some cases we just don't, y'all don't have our information, we don't have your information. So that could just be a first step that's easy, that could help us.
Great suggestion, and the clerks can work on that. I was going to say that I think we should really be more proactive, maybe about reaching out and spreading the word to around boards. For instance, for Planning Commission, even our own commissions, people who are serving on DOS, for example, they may also be interested in the Planning Commission. I was thinking also about the neighborhood college graduates and the city, county planning department academy graduates. Do we ever try to think directly about recruiting from them? You know, yeah.
I mean, we've done it at the graduations where we encourage the folks who complete the program, like, hey, if you want to keep
Yes.
serving your city,
Right.
sign up
Well,
for these things.
Yeah.
The other thing that the city clerk's office does is kind of a member spotlight for a board commissioner every month, and like from each one, and like highlight somebody and the work that they're doing as a way to recruit. So those are the things that I know the city clerk's
Yeah.
office has done historically to kind of move
Yeah.
that around.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that, I'm going to follow up with our staff to ask if they have a listserv of everyone who has participated in the neighborhood college, because to me, that would be some folks who may, they've already showed that first level of engagement, just to let them know, hey, there's openings on these key boards and commissions, and for the academy as well. Okay. Great. Okay. So we are going to move on to the small area plan scoping report, and Kayla Seibel, senior planner, Sarah Long, planner. It's listed on here too.
Good morning again. My name is Kayla Seibel, Senior Planner at the Planning Department. I have a brief overview of the Small Area Planning Scoping Report. As a reminder, this item is in the department work program as a first step before our team takes on more small area plans. This effort helped us propose a framework and a definition of small area plans, as well as a recommended list of areas in Durham to start with. During the comprehensive plan engagement, we heard interests from residents and elected officials to undertake special studies and look at areas in more detail. So our experience with small area plans in the past led us to shape the scoping report to address these list of issues. We want in our work to increase resident representation and diversity through equitable engagement, improve plan effectiveness by really focusing on land use issues and things the planning department can affect, record infrastructure concerns, since those are concern in many communities, and work with our partner departments to get those concerns passed on and worked on. And then we wanted to make sure that everything we're doing with small area plans is still compatible with Durham's larger growth management strategy, and the comp plan. So that leads us to our scoping report. I'm going to give an overview of each of these sections that are in your memo. Additionally, much of this content will be used to craft a web page and educational materials explaining what a small area plan is and how and when we're starting them. Simply put, a small area plan is a planning initiative that engages residents in identifying needs and priorities for a specific geography. So in this definition, we stress the importance of compatibility with the Durham Comprehensive Plan. And just like the comp plan, a small area plan can be used in these 3 ways: provide guidance for development proposals, inform city or county work, and help write development regulations for the UDO. We see a few benefits to a small area planning process beyond the actual outcome of the physical document. As this is also an engagement process, we have an opportunity to build connections with and relationships with residents, work on mapping together, collect stories and information from community. And we think this messaging is helpful when residents ask us why they should participate. So we have a list of benefits here. Going into plan components, this is going to vary by the unique needs of an area, but in general, we generated a list of topics that we can look into. Most of these categories are land use focused. We wanted to see where we can help solve problems through zoning or high-level visioning, especially if there are city and county-owned parcels. And there is also a long list of plan recommendation examples in your memo as well of types of things that could come out of a small area plan. Also in your memo, we have a list of selection criteria to help narrow down areas in Durham that might need a small area plan. We use this list to generate upcoming small area plans that are in the next few slides. This list is framed as yes or no questions, but they can also be answered more thoroughly to develop the purpose and need for a project before beginning public engagement. So there are a number of questions regarding land use visioning needs, impacts of development on communities, and environmental concerns. So we're proposing 5 areas to begin our small area planning. For information, many of these areas include significant potential redevelopment or infill sites, traditionally underserved populations, and are experiencing development pressures. So here is the list sorted by fiscal year for the work plan programming. We'll show snapshots of these areas, but I do want to note 2 important points, especially since we have not done public engagement yet on these areas. The boundaries are not final, and many of them include multiple neighborhoods, so it'll be important to work with residents to see what those boundaries should be. We have a starting point, but those can be adjusted at the beginning of the project. And then an important initial step will be reaching out to neighborhoods to gauge interest, scope, and design the equitable engagement strategies, especially if there are already active neighborhood organizations, working with them to increase representation and diversity, like we said before. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Scott to go over the areas that we're recommending.
Good morning again. So yeah, definitely one of the hardest parts about this exercise was trying to figure out what a small area planning area actually is. As y'all might know, Durham doesn't have a whole lot of really well-established neighborhood boundaries. There's a handful in the center city. We have some suburban HOAs that have pretty well-defined boundaries, but there's a lot of areas that they aren't well-defined neighborhoods. So we had to do a little guesswork to try to get this started. But as Kayla said, we want to work with the communities to find out what the exact boundaries are, but we needed to find a way to help divide up the 298 square miles into smaller areas and help try to figure out which ones kind of rose to the top. So that's what this attempt is. We're not attempting to impose neighborhood boundaries or names on anybody. We just want to kind of get this work started. So we did divide up all of Durham County into smaller areas that would make potential small area planning areas. I keep saying area. Using what we, already established boundaries, whether they were census block groups, historic district boundaries, larger zoning, like a PDR zoning district, things like that, to help us kind of carve up the county into smaller areas that we could actually tackle in this process. And so that we created some working planning area boundaries, applied the criteria to them. We had a few that kind of bubble up to the top that we thought would make a really good first set. So the first one is Lakewood Park, which is the area around Lakewood Shopping Center, includes the Lion Park and Lafayette Street neighborhoods. This one is got a very diverse population, including a lot of Spanish speakers, and there's been a lot of talk about the redevelopment of the Lakewood Shopping Center, and this would be a chance to get on the kind of front end of that. The second, we're calling Greater Bragtown, includes most of the area that in the Bragtown neighborhood would consider Bragtown, I think, but there's also a lot of smaller neighborhoods within there, Oxford, Hamlin, Colonial Village, and the area along the Carver Street extension where there's been a lot of rezonings recently. This also has the proposed Roxborough Rail Trail going right through the heart of it, and several large shopping centers that, including Oxford Commons, that are potential for redevelopment. The third one we're calling Hillside Oak Ridge. It's the area kind of west of Hillside High School and east of, more or less east of South Roxborough, between Cornwallis and MLK. This is another area that has a funded trail, the Third Fork Creek extension going through the middle of it. Includes several different neighborhoods, a lot of smaller infill sites, and the county-owned shopping center at MLK and South Roxborough. Fourth, we're calling South Hoover. This is kind of the southeast portion of northeast central Durham. It's an area that it's got a lot of different land uses going on. It includes some recently or pending large zoning case along South Hoover Street or Road. And then lastly, the Garrett Road area, which is another area with a lot of development and redevelopment possibilities, and including has a state-funded planned interchange that would have a pretty huge effect on the land use in that area. So what we're proposing, was I going to do this part or are you going to do this part? Okay. So what we're proposing is that we want to start on Lakewood Park then now, basically, tomorrow. If you are okay with that, we had a new position added to our budget with his kind of focus was to start in small area plan. So we'd basically use that position to start on one immediately that was kind of beyond the current work program. And then sometime in early FY25, start on the Bragtown and the Hillside Oak Ridge ones, and then save the other two for either later in FY26 or early 27, with the understanding that these would be set with our work program every year. So if we learn, as we do the first few small area plans, we learn what works well, what doesn't, what priorities may change from the elected officials about what you'd like to see out of small area plans, we can certainly select or reprioritize or add, different ranking criteria in order to find other small area planning areas we can work in. So that's it. Kayla and I can answer any questions that you might have.
Well, thank you both so much. And Councilmember Caballero.
I have many. Can you go back to the list of the ones, because like each one I have questions around? Yeah. And thank you. Either, it doesn't matter. I guess maybe the maps with the thing will be helpful. So I think first, and you're naming it, and I think y'all are going to do that resident engagement. You often hear about, folks have changed the name of our neighborhood and we don't want to be, so y'all are aware of that. I think folks are going to have maybe strong opinions around that. So good luck on that. I think one of the things that I would love to see is the interaction. I guess this is great. Like, in theory, I'm not opposed. I guess I have a lot of questions around implementation and practical part. How is it going to align to our CIP? when residents have concerns around infrastructure especially, and then it doesn't map to our CIP, it's not a thing that's anywhere close to being funded or a priority in that moment, how are we going to do anything about that? How is that going to come back to council, which then has to make the decisions on CIP and the funding? So that's a big question that I have. Secondly, how is that going to interact? Again, it's around infrastructure. I want this on my road. That's an NCDOT road. How is it connecting back to transit and MPO plans, especially the Garrett Road one? When I think about the interchange that's named, we're already fighting with NCDOT on the vision. There had been lots of stakeholder engagement, et cetera, et cetera. Then you get into like what Chapel Hill may need on the other side there, right? So that's another question I have. So I have a lot of questions. I said I did. And then I think the other kind of, if we did the comp plan, right? And let's say that this part of your neighborhood is now really imagined as a denser version, but I don't want that. Like, how are we going to actually be transparent with neighbors in these hard conversations? Especially, I don't want this to be an opportunity to relitigate decisions that have already been made. And I feel like it's unfair to put staff in that position, because then y'all are like the messengers of bad news over and over and over again. And that doesn't really put you in a space that empowers you, that makes you feel good, and that makes, you want to stay a city worker for the city of Durham. So I'm just going to name it. And then I think not this one. I guess broadly, like Garrett Road area, this goes back to infrastructure. We've done a lot of work around equity in the city of Durham. We can all name that Garrett Road is space, those folks need better infrastructure too, but I would imagine that they wouldn't rise on our own equity tools and in the need of those infrastructure improvements. So then how are we, again, marrying those things, and then how are we not setting up city staff to then just be the bearers of bad news? We've done a small area plan. It's clear that y'all are wanting these improvements, and we can't deliver it because of other decisions we've made. And so those are the big questions. Sorry to just put it all out there, but that's where I'm at. Thank you.
Let's see. Trying to think, there was a lot in there, Councilmember Caballero. So
thank you, and feel free to I'm sure my colleagues have questions. Feel free to follow back up. You don't have to answer all of those, but this is the space in public to ask that, to probe for these things, and to prepare community. And so that's why I'm raising them, and I don't want to put you answer all the things now. So again, feel free to circle around too.
Yeah, I guess two things in general to the kind of about the vibe of your questions. I think one of the advantages of small area plans, and we've had some good experience with this in Walltown, is that it's a chance for residents to have kind of close interactions with the city and county government. And so there's a lot of stuff that's come up in Walltown, which was stuff we could just call up Public Works Stormwater or call up County S&E, and we could work on it. It's not something that gets adopted in the plan. It's just part of the process, and it helps folks get a better understanding of how the city works. And we could talk through the comp plan and the place type map, and this is why these things were designated this way. So in some ways we can work through some of those things. Those are some of the, definitely some of the things that we are going to hear and that do concern me when we go out there. It's going to be a lot of people thinking they're making their Christmas list, and they're going to want a lot of stuff, and we don't have a lot of money for a lot of stuff. So I think that's something we'll also need some help from elected officials on, is expectation setting. Because particularly in Walltown, there are some potential, not a lot, but some things that would require CIP funding and it's all within the city, so it would require the city council to make those decisions. And so it's help with the elected officials helping us set the expectations that we can throw those infrastructure needs into the pot, but we have a huge city and a huge county that have lots of needs, and that it's not guaranteed. But it does help us work more directly with residents on like what these specific needs might be.
Yeah, I was just going to add that, it is our job as staff to be transparent with the public about things, but having been a staff member that back in the dark ages was on the staff CIP committee, we do weigh what's in adopted plans. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to rise to the top of the list that year or the year after or any year, but we can be transparent with the community about that. I think this also affords us the opportunity to take a finer grain look at some of the place type. And to your point, I think about like not relitigating. I agree with that, but there were some places where we didn't get a really super deep look at it. And I think we do feel like it's worth, a refinement look. And that I would not consider that relitigating it. I would consider that refining the work that we started with the comp plan moving forward. So I think that's another positive that could come out of this.
I think what will be helpful as y'all are looking for, and this will fall on council more than county commission, especially on infrastructure, right? And the funding of infrastructure. So I think that as y'all are having those conversations, what would be helpful for me as an elected is also if things need to shift in how we do the CIP, right? Then we need to know that. We can't advocate for things that we don't know. And so as you all are having these conversations out in community and it's clear, like, tools are great, and then there comes an era where that is now, it is no longer useful for how we've done business for however long. And so that is going to be really important, is that if that process, because we know that would take a lot to move that ship in a different direction. And so having that clearly communicated in this space and other spaces as y'all are going out to community and having these conversations is critically important, because like as decision makers, the adoption of the budget and the adoption of the CIP are two of the most important things we do every year. Thanks. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up and thank you for highlighting things that we need to be aware of. I do think that this is an opportunity. I know when we adopted the comprehensive land use plan and specifically the future place type map, very broad stroke. And this really helps us to get down and look really what is happening on the ground. And I think it is important to get input from neighbors, especially around the comp plan goals. I mean, how do we really create a transit opportunity area or a 15-minute community within that area? What does that really look like? And I think that making sure that we emphasize that we are doing this to implement the comp plan. And also, I want to make sure, as Councilmember Caballero raised, that we are really looking at, for instance, Vision Zero plan that's about to be finalized. We're about to finish the MTP, the 2055 MTP. We have the comp plan, but I think this is an opportunity to help us implement and integrate adopted plans. And so then when we do have development that comes along, if we have the small area plan, then we can help, rather than just asking the city to help pay for the infrastructure, we can really ask developers to help us implement that infrastructure. So that's how I'm looking at it. I want to just lift up, I know we said one of the goals is to include public property, city and county, but I want to lift up Durham Public Schools property as well, because they really control and have a lot more property than we do. And honestly, any other publicly owned land that is in the small area, it could be Go Triangle, it could be NCDOT. I have a question about what we designate as open space, because it looks nice and green, but is that land actually really even protected as open space? I think that's going to be important for us to know. What is the status of that open space?
So On the place type map, anything that was designated open space was something that we were confident was protected through ownership or regulation. So okay, if it was a city or county property that was, seemed to be fairly environmentally impacted, we would mark that as open space, knowing that we, the people, own it and we wouldn't develop it. But then also things like we designated the at least the floodways, which are, at least for the time being, prohibited from being developed by federal rules, as well as undeveloped floodplains. So we're fairly certain what's shown as open space on the place type map is protected in some way, but there is a specific action is to try to get better protections for the things that aren't already like formally protected. So things like city and county land that's just currently surplus, it's not actually designated for, conservation in any way, or if there are severely impacted flood-prone properties, is there a way to acquire those sorts of things. If that answers your question.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's going to be important going forward to look into that. And then lastly, so I like the way the Lakewood map had the names of streets. Not all of them did. So is it possible to have that going forward?
Yeah, the extent was too. Some of those areas are huge, so
Okay.
I
Or
tried to
maybe
get
some of the major streets.
Yes, definitely. We had the interstates labeled, but we'll definitely make it bigger maps, so it's more zoomed in.
And was Bragtown the only one that overlaps city and county land?
Of these 5, yes.
Okay. Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, thank you so much, Councilmember.
Thank you. I think this is fantastic work. Really, really excited. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for everything that you put into it. As a planner, I can support the fact that conversations around labeling streets can often be very challenging. I appreciate all of your comments and questions. I agree with them. And coming back to Councilmember Caballero, I agree that it's going to be really, really important to make sure that this is not used as an opportunity for residents to be exclusive, to be exclusionary, and to exclude people. I think that's going to need to be an important priority going in. And you already mentioned it. I have full faith. That's something on the top of the mind of planners in our planning department is, you mentioned balancing with the growth management framework of the comprehensive plan. So you can't just say currently in the place type map, it is transit-oriented development and you want it to be single family. No, that doesn't balance the local interests with the interests of the broader community and the broader region. So I think that's important going in. Just a few things here, and I think small area planning is so important and so fundamental. And Sarah, you mentioned it's fine-grained. It's tailoring. It's taking a fine-grained look in our neighborhoods and our communities. And I think the list of questions that you all recorded in the memo about how to identify what areas to conduct small area planning in is a really good list of questions, and some of those these are areas of anticipated change, anticipated growth to the extent that we can identify areas of change. And this is a process of managing that change as far in advance as possible before the rezoning applications start coming in, before the building permits start coming in. This is an opportunity for us to provide a little bit more management of that change in that process. So there's the Walltown small area planning process that's moving forward. So far, I think that's gone very well. There's also the blueprint process, which the planning department, my understanding, has not played a major role in because that's been led by Downtown Durham Incorporated. But that is essentially a small area planning process with a little bit more emphasis on the urban design aspect. And I think in looking at that, the blueprint plan, I think they've done a very good job of the urban design aspect. And so I think that is a big opportunity here as well, is especially when there are, when looking at Lakewood Park, the Lakewood Shopping Center, Walltown, Northgate Mall, getting the urban design vision right, even if it's not regulatory in nature, I think is a big opportunity and might require some additional resources. So I want to throw that out there. If you guys need resources to bring in folks who can do a design charrette or something like that, I think that would be money very well spent. And those can be done, not super expensive. So that's one thing, the urban design and bringing in that sort of staff augmentation in those areas. The CIP obviously ties in, I think also potentially, and I know Greensboro did this, but tying in participatory budgeting and those kinds of things. I think that's something that, can be explored as we start moving through these processes. I also, and this is coming back to something Councilmember Caballero mentioned, implementation is so important. The honest communication with the community about realistic expectations, but also, ultimately that's what we want to do, is good implementation, good visioning, and then good implementation of that visioning and tracking progress of that. And you all have added a lot to your plate. There's a long list of small area plans here. And I just want to say, I appreciate that. I'm excited about it. And if you need to back off on one or two and lower the number of plans, I think in order to make sure that we are focusing on that implementation and getting that right, as much as I want to see as many small area plans as possible, I think, we just want to make sure that we're not overwhelming staff and that we're able to conduct these as best as possible and with the best outcomes as possible as well. So that's just my 2 cents there on that. I know that Raleigh created an entirely new division within their planning department to focus specifically on implementation of small area plans. I don't know how that's going. I don't know who is part of that. I've met a couple of the planners in that division. They seem to be doing really good work. Might just be something to take a look at and have a conversation about. That's it. Yeah. Thank you so much for the work that you've put into this. I'm really, really excited.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So we're going to move on. Oh, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, just really quickly, because this was the part around mapping of land. The Duke has a housing council that's also doing a lot of that work. And so it may be worth staff reaching out to those folks to see how much data they've already collected and how we can collaborate to help y'all. Thank you.
So next we're going to move on to the number 11, new UDO revised zoning map, other module 2 updates with Bo Dubrensky.
Good morning, Bo Dubrensky. I've also got Robin Schultz, who will assist me significantly. Once again, here with another Unified Development Ordinance update. As you all are aware, just to summarize, we've been working with our technical consultant, Good Studio, and our equitable engagement consultant, Tuan Allen. Last month, we were here and we presented to you a portion of Module 2, which was the proposed sign regulations. And we also had a brief discussion about some schedule impacts and other minor impacts that may come from, or that we know have come from Session Bill 382, the Disaster Recovery Act. We went over that language last month. I've included that in your packet so you can see the specific language, but I just want to talk a little bit about what our general approach moving forward will be. So we will move forward with substantially similar residential districts. There may be some modifications here and there. Due to legislation, there will certainly be modifications due to continued feedback from the community and you all. The non-residential districts themselves, the new ones, the standards, the new standards will apply to new development. And what we will do is essentially have two versions or two ordinance regulations for these non-residential districts, one for the existing development and another for new development that is proposed. There's some specific language that we'll continue to work on in terms of splicing out when the new UDO applies, when the new development, when a undeveloped property comes, or a change of use, or whatever the other mechanisms may be. We will, in regards to the scheduling impacts, we'll be bringing an updated schedule to you in March, so we can get a better look in terms of how the process will look moving forward, as well as continuing to engage with the community on Module 2 with any necessary changes. Any questions? I'll pause there so we can.
Thank you. Yeah, I just also want to I think everyone's aware there are possible remedies for the SB 382. So just obviously we want to be aware of that. Hopefully that will happen. Yeah. Anyone else? Okay. Yes.
I think that's part of the reason why we wanted to continue with the project as originally envisioned as much as possible, because we do kind of have some faith that hopefully something will happen. And so we didn't want to completely change course and then things get, changed in a way that's favorable, and then we lose even more time. So we wanted this was the safest way to move forward that would comply without derailing the project. And if things do change, then it's an easy kind of switch over.
Appreciate everyone being flexible, adaptable, and thank you.
Great. So just wanted to, this presentation or this conversation we'd like to have will be just a bit of an update on our responses to some of our engagement efforts associated with Module 1, which were fairly robust. So just to really summarize some of the big themes that we heard a lot. There are many minor comments that we have that are also being incorporated, but just some of the big themes that we heard. One of them, of course, residents shared some concern about the placement of the proposed RD zoning district in certain areas of the county that were outside of the city, but within the UGB. You'll see this area here on the map that we're showing, attachment B. Members of the community also shared a desire to preserve and potentially expand food production uses in more areas than what the original draft had shown. Robin Schultz is going to talk a bit about that in about 5 minutes. There were also two other themes that we heard and that we will continue to evaluate. Will be the first, of course, residents were interested in some design regulations for development in the RD that use the compact or affordable option. I'm sure all of you have it memorized already, but the standards that were presented to you for Module 1 did show some limited design standards for those developments. We're going to have some more in-depth engagement efforts, really content specific, to really nail down what those design standards could or should be. Another theme, of course, that we heard was interest in the affordability amounts in both the level of affordability and the percentage of the overall development. That's something we'll continue to analyze and we'll update you on in the future. But digging into some of the map-related feedback that I already mentioned. My goodness. So the comments that we heard most frequently were the RD district proposed inside the urban growth boundary, but outside of the current city limits. The RD district allows for lots that are as small as 5,000 square feet. And if the units, if they proceed with the compact or the affordable option, those units may get much smaller than the 5,000 square feet. And so at times it could be fairly dense development, certainly much more dense than what it is today. This ultimately will make sense and does align with the comprehensive plan and aligns with the intent of the urban growth boundary. Also, in many instances, or in those instances, the place site map itself. However, these types of developments will require city utilities for that types of density, and ultimately, we expect annexation requests to go with those areas. And so, knowing that these developments would have to move forward with legislative process and aren't necessarily feasible at this time, we've adjusted the map and proposed the RB district in these areas that are within the UGB, but outside the city, that had this established residential with a mixed residential place type. This, let me find my number so I can be fairly exact. So this goes from roughly 500 acres to 17,000 acres. One thing to note here, and especially in this attachment we're showing today, the RB zoning district was fairly underutilized, certainly within the UGB, but throughout. So that this actually expands the use of that district, and in some of these areas may ultimately be appropriate. And that, excuse me, that's really the summary of this change. We'll pause here if y'all have any questions about the map change.
Just to clarify, this is also around before the land that was outside of the urban growth boundary. Was that also before RD and not RB? Can you clarify? No, okay. So this, and the RB allows for agricultural uses.
That's correct. And we're about to dig into that topic a little bit more.
Okay.
So may pause, but yes, there's obviously impacts.
Okay, because it struck me as that was one of the other key issues was around agricultural uses.
Yep, we'll talk about that a little bit more.
Okay, thank you. At this point.
Great. I'll let Robin talk a bit about some of the changes that were made due to the ag issues.
Yeah.
All right. I might stay behind here so I can drive if that's okay with y'all. My name is Robin, as you know, in the planning department. I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about those agricultural changes. So when we look here, you're going to see on the left that figure 1 is where agricultural uses are currently allowed. And so that's going to be commercial crop production within RS10, RS8, RSM. That's going to be that lighter green that you see more towards the, the core of the city, right? But it's still that RS, those suburban style districts. And then the dark green is going to be the RR and the RS20. And so that's every other agricultural uses, thinking about things like livestock, et cetera. In the first draft of the UDO zoning map, which you're going to see on the right, is the RA and the RB. And these are the two areas that that allowed ag in the first draft, at least. So you can see we had heard a lot during engagement at almost every engagement event that we had about this concern. So we started looking into it and found that, there was a significant decrease. So just to give you some of those numbers, you'll see that it went from 70% for that commercial crop production and 62% for all the other ag uses down to 22%, which you can see pretty clearly here, right? Like this is roughly 70%. This is, considerably less, right? And so in thinking about how to shift that, just to back up one step, I think part of the reason that this occurred, right, is that as we're trying to densify within the UGB, we consolidated a lot of those districts that are within the UGB to the RD, right? And so part of it is like a translation error. And so we are trying to think about how to better incorporate agricultural uses within the UGB because we've heard so much about how important that is. And we obviously want to support agricultural uses. So to sort of tackle that, we've adjusted the map. And so you'll see that within RD, it allows for crop production, sort of taking out the commercial aspect of that. There are a lot of different agricultural uses that aren't specifically focused on selling those farm products. So allowing that agricultural uses there, right, to sort of account for that change, but also that addition of the RB that Bo was talking about for all of the other ag uses, as well as the RA, and then the addition of the conservation zoning district. There are quite a few conservation properties that do practice agriculture. You know, thinking about properties like UCAN, Urban Agronomics. Oh, I just spoke with them. I'm so sorry. It's too early for me. But regardless, these are conservation properties that often, you know, utilize those agricultural uses, often contained through like conservation easements or other private agreements, right? So these aren't, you know, large agricultural soybean manufacturers. So things like that. So when we actually look at it, this change does shift the math to it actually allows more crop production, and there is a slight decrease of about, it's less than a percentage for all other ag, and part of that is due to the fact that you'll see here, you know, there's some removal of the RR. These spaces were RR before, but you know, that's like Mickey, things of that nature where that's likely not appropriate. Those have been shifted to the park district. So things of that nature, trying to accommodate for those things. I'll also denote that within the first draft, a lot of the agricultural uses that are currently regulated in the UDO are in the limited use standards, which are going to be in section 5.3. Those were not provided in the first draft. So that also throws in sort of like a complicating factor for this first analysis. And, you know, I think having it out there and getting this feedback is really useful so that when we're working on drafting 5.3, we can make sure that we're incorporating all of that engagement. But I just wanted to note that. Additionally, as you probably all know, anything that's outside of the city limits, so doesn't matter UGB or not, but if it's outside of a municipal area and it's operating within the definition of a bona fide farm per state statute, they are exempt from our zoning regardless. Any federal land can do whatever they want by just being, you know, owned by the federal government. And so there are other, you know, things to think about generally, but obviously this is sort of speaking to the overall potential for agriculture and not so much what is actually occurring on the ground. But we do know that zoning obviously can affect agricultural potential, and we really wanted to be cognizant of that. We're still working with different community groups on this. So this is not the final draft, but this is the first initial step as we start honing in on the actual language and those additional standards. And that's all I have for you.
Well, thank you so much. And I just want to say, first of all, thank you to the planning staff for having these sessions at the library. I've heard from a lot of people that people really appreciate that, just that's a standing thing and people can stop by. And I think this is an example of how, I mean, I appreciate that this, you know, was flagged for planning staff. And this is what's going to happen. You know, we don't realize things until we start looking carefully at it. And I just want to say, as a county commissioner, first of all, Durham is really small. We are a small county. But, you know, having a strong local food system is one of our key priorities in Durham County. As a matter of fact, on Monday, we had a presentation. We have a food security coordinator. We have invested in developing a strong local food network, dealing with food insecurity in our community. It is a huge problem that we're trying to address, and we're trying to do it systemically with having the ability for people locally to be growing food for our community and to support local farmers and community gardens and, you know, whatnot. We are also investing in a farm campus on that's a key part. We give out grants to small farmers. We prioritize farmland easements for farmers. You know, we have, so I just want to say this is a very big priority for Durham County government, and we've invested a lot in it, and we want to see that continue. So I would just say, whatever you're doing now in this stage, I just hope that you are consulting with our food security coordinator, Raina. And also, there's a local group that meets every single month, the Food Security Network. Like, those folks should be definitely involved with this. And obviously our Soil and Water Board, our Farmland Preservation Board, our Cooperative Extension, who's leading all the work around the farm campus, to make sure, and our open space folks, just make sure that everyone is involved in the conversation. So thank you. Any other comments, questions from?
The whole thing or just?
That's it for this item.
Yeah, I've got a couple. I'm just curious, coming back to the RD within the urban growth boundary, that is consolidating numerous existing zoning districts. I think I'd just be curious to maybe see what I'm interested in is are there areas where dimensional standards are being substantially changed? And has there been a look at potential implications, gentrification, displacement, those kinds of things? So I'd be curious to, I don't know if that's a mapping exercise or seeing something about where are the dimensional standards changing most in the city, what neighborhoods would be most impacted. I don't know, but I'd be curious to see that. And then this is a common theme. But since we're sort of talking about RD parcels outside of city limits, parcels within urban growth boundary, small and big parcels, coming back to this conversation of a zoning district or zoning districts that are tooled to be best used for new annexations on large parcels of land that are going to be master planned. How do we make sure that it's not just that the expectation is that it's going to be an integrated master planned community? And one thing that I had considered before was maybe like a PUD, PD, planned development district, or some other kind of tool that allows that discretionary review, flexibility, but make sure that we are achieving the goals that we want to from the comprehensive plan through the zoning process, through the annexations and rezoning process.
So I'll start with that one. And I think this is where we have heard different things. We've definitely heard a desire to make more things administrative, as long as we agree what the rules are and the rules are good, to try and push more things that way. We can certainly, I fully anticipate that there, even in that kind of a scenario, you're going to have folks that are going to want to do something more different and ask to change their zoning anyway. So I think that's a conversation that needs to be had, particularly in this venue, because I think that is a significant shift in direction from what we have been hearing previously. So that's one thing. The other thing is that in terms of like the setbacks and gentrification question, one of the things that I think has happened is we have a lot of particularly in-town neighborhoods that were built that, predated our zoning from even like several iterations ago, and their setbacks already didn't match. Like the character didn't match what the zoning currently allows anyway. And so I think a lot of this will go back to a more urban neighborhood kind of character in terms of those setbacks. I don't, we've also had like infill standards that have tried to function that way somewhat. So I'm not sure that this will necessarily in and of itself really accelerate gentrification in some neighborhoods. I definitely think that allowing, more units, denser development, certainly has that potential. But that, again, the direction that we have heard so far is, we need more housing, we need to intensify in the core, et cetera. And so that is what this is trying to do inside that UGB. We're open to looking at ways that we can kind of ameliorate, mitigate some of the negative effects of gentrification. So we're all ears.
May I add one piece of that? I apologize, Councilmember. But in terms of mapping that, I think that's something we can explore. But I think there's going to be less instances where the dimensional standards they're reducing is that much different than what is actually built versus the standard itself, right? And so that's true in outside of urban tier, outside of the RU5, and which is RS10, the RS8s, even in many cases the RS20. So it's something we can look into, but we don't have that mapped. And then the PDR subdivisions themselves those dimensional standards will actually be less. So in those instances, it would be fairly consistent. So, and that's going to be a large portion of the city and county, or the established residential. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's fine. I think it's just something I want to keep an eye on. And if there are certain, I mean, you mentioned if there are certain areas where we might be concerned about potential impacts of gentrification, I think that we should at least take a look. What are the areas where that could potentially happen, and then go from there. It sounds like there are a decent number of areas where there's some dimensional standards that are not actually aligned with the maybe older buildings that are on the site. So definitely right sizing our zoning district standards to meet a more urban character, I think is good and important. Get rid of those nonconformities. I am very interested, in on the edges in this process of managing our outward growth in that master planned community, making sure that when annexations and rezonings are coming into the city, that it can't just be single family only, as we've seen so often, that it needs to be more consistent with what the comp plan is calling for. I definitely think that that's very, very important in this UDO rewrite.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think one of the things that we have not fully explored yet is when you have a subdivision of a certain size, what are the requirements in terms of like the mix of housing types or, other amenities that we could put in there to ensure that we're getting the types of development that really does follow the comprehensive plan. So that's next on the list.
Cool. Yeah. And so I would be interested in kind of what are the qualities and how do we incorporate those qualities into the actual expected zoning district, and what are the expectations of what the zoning district is that you're going to annex into when you come into the city? How do we make sure that zoning district gives us the tool to ensure that they are following the direction of the comprehensive plan, making sure that 100% of new units are within a certain walk of park, playground, greenway, those kinds of things, that we are receiving the public goods that are necessary to create a thriving community. I think that needs to be embedded in expectation in the zoning district, that developers and landowners are expected to come under when they annex into the city.
Yeah, sorry, I just got lost there for a second. I was trying to circle back to what Councilmember Baker said. So I'm trying to understand, is your question basically that, how are you tying it to gentrification? I'm just totally lost on the size of lot. Like, what is the concern there? I'm just trying to understand it.
So I'm raising two different things here. So then it would definitely be, one is thinking about the edges. This is not conversation around gentrification, that
Yeah,
that one,
yeah, so that's
sort of the
right,
master.
okay,
Yeah,
okay.
That's one bucket is how are we thinking about when a large landowner of a large parcel wants to annex into the city? How are we making sure that they are coming under a zoning district, that zoning district provides us with the tools to ensure that they are following the direction of the comprehensive plan, that it's a mixed and coordinated and complete community? So that's one bucket.
Can I have just from staff, I mean, so these planned, sorry, I forgot what you called it. No, he's talking about the type of product.
I suggest it's
Yeah.
one possibility, but
So is that kind of like what you see out in Cary where it's like its own little, I'm trying to it would be helpful to have a visual because, and I would also like to see pricing on those things because what I've understood from a lot of those, like you think Southern Village and things like that, that's what I think you're talking about, but I don't understand for sure. Those communities tend to be pretty pricey. And so those are not what I would consider attainable housing for the average person. So if we're going to, not that we shouldn't look into that, but I would love to see some actual successful models of that attach it to the price of the housing. So that's one thing that I would love to see if y'all are going to go down that path. And Sarah, you'd asked for some direction. This is a space to do it. So I'm taking that opportunity. I think where Campo meets, there's that new kind of, again, mixed, yeah, you can walk to the little, yeah, I mean, it's got a Lululemon in there. I don't consider that. So I just want to understand, like, again, I'm interested in practical solutions that are achievable in the, thanks.
Yeah, so I think what Councilmember Baker is talking about is planned unit development is essentially, it's kind of like our PDR zoning district, right? It's a build your own zoning district with some general parameters that allows someone to propose a development and then, the legislative process happens. In our case, our PDR is primarily residential, but there are other places that have these broader PUDs that are used for, any type of use. So I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's generally, you're just talking about a district that's a zoning tool that is broader and allows more negotiation between the governing body, and the developer that's proposing something.
Thank you. And I guess what I would like to understand is so like what we hear a lot with like the kind of annexation stressors is that Briar Creek is such a massively large commercial center that it is very hard for folks to imagine building additional commercial in some of these spaces. And so that's again, I want the implementation and that intersection of what's the reality on the ground that we do need to consider. Not that this isn't a good idea. I mean, I think everybody wants that 15-minute city, but you don't create that overnight, right? You do want to have that clear zoning designation, but that whatever we do next, yes, it moves us forward, but is still within an understanding of what other things are at play that may create limitations for some of these things. That's what I would like to have a better understanding of. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and I would just say, I'm interpreting what Councilmember Baker said is how do we give that flexibility also to developers? So it could be neighborhood commercial. It could be, so not necessarily Briar Creek, but how do you have a little neighborhood store, integrated into the community? And how is it designed differently so there's better connectivity or walkability? So, yeah. And also the diversity of housing. So there could be single family with multifamily, but yeah. So
I think the other thing is that, right now, when things come to council, particularly as an example, you all are looking for things because we don't have an ordinance that really fulfills the vision, implements the vision of the comprehensive plan. You are asking for and inquiring about things to kind of fill that gap, right? So our hope as staff is that this new ordinance is going to, get at most of the typical things that you ask for time and time again. And then, the only gaps left are going to be things like things that really cannot be required, like offsite improvements or things like that. And I think when someone comes for annexation through the UEA process, there is still an opportunity to try and get some other things worked out through that process, even if there isn't necessarily a zoning change, because in the annexation, you would still need a utility extension. So, yeah, we're working on it. We're trying.
Can I then ask clarification on the second part of what you were saying? Because you said it was two different.
Yeah, I was just looking, the other bucket was, so the RD zoning district would consolidate a number of existing zoning districts. I'm just looking for more information. And maybe it doesn't even have to be a map. Maybe it's just the table, and maybe that's already coming. It probably already is. Of what are the dimensional standards of those? Actually, I would be interested in what are the dimensional standards of those? And are there certain parts of our city that we need to be looking at where there could be potential impacts, either positive or negative? I'm curious, and I'd like that information.
Yeah, I think we can provide that information in terms of the standards, in terms of what's built. Obviously, we're going to be limited in terms of surveying the existing properties and have an idea. We can provide that anecdotally, but we can do the dimensional standards.
And I just have one other comment that I gotten from a resident, which was in the maps, if you could show the water, bodies of water in a different color. I know there was kind of white where there's Lake Mickey, but also, Falls Lake, because it can distort how much open space there really is. So if you could do a different color for any of the Jordan Lake, Falls Lake, Lake Mickey, that would be helpful. Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, you guys are really busy. Wow. All right, and on to busy. Item number 12, our FY26 work program preview, and that's you, Sarah.
Yeah, so thank you. This is the time of year where we give you a little bit of a preview of what we think we're going to include in the draft work program. So certainly the conversation about small area planning was really helpful. In your agenda materials for this item, there was also a synopsis, a summary of the things that we've been working on this year, including a few things that were not explicitly on the work program. Typically throughout the year, staff is able to absorb some smaller things here and there. And so that's why we notice that often we forget to daylight those to you all. So we're going to try and do a better job of that, just so you all have a sense of other things that we may be percolating on. So for next year, it is coming up on 2 years since the adoption of the comprehensive plan. That means we need to do the first kind of 2-year report out and set of updates. So that'll be one of the things that we have on the work program. We have the small area plans, which Councilmember Baker, I appreciate your comment, and we'll probably scale that back. The 2 we had intended to maybe just start them at the tail end of the year. So we may just push them off to give us that little bit of space. Couple of things that I want to specifically mention that tie to budget requests we have in. One is a budget request to do a Durham County-wide open space plan. One of the reasons we think a county-wide plan is really important is that open spaces, habitat areas, wildlife corridors, those don't stop at arbitrary boundaries, right? And we really want to look holistically across our entire jurisdiction to see, where we need to put protections in place, where we need to prioritize either city or county acquisition, et cetera. So this would be a plan that would also help inform some of those decisions for both the city and the county. The other, and you'll see I've listed in the memo the different actions that these items relate to. The other item that we're asking for funding for is a multimodal traffic impact analysis. One of the things that we've been saying actually for many, many years now is that the current TIA process, it only looks at motor vehicle traffic. And really, as we try to make sure that we are more focused on pedestrians and other modes of rolling around that are not motor vehicles, we need a way to capture that so that we can, similarly to, roadway improvements, we can also require non-roadway improvements that help mobility in these other modes. So this would be a funding for a consultant to develop such a program and process for us that then we would use. And then the other couple of things are on our historic preservation side of the house. The local review criteria, which is the document that governs all of our local historic districts and landmarks. That says that we need to be updating the architectural inventories of all these districts every 10 years on a 10-year cycle. So we're coming up on the 10th year. And so this is an ask to update those survey field work, basically. And then this was mentioned earlier, it was started this year, but will conclude next year, is the Emerywood Estates National Register nomination that we're very excited about. So that's kind of the high level overview, and wanted to see what kind of feedback you all had.
Thank you, Sarah. Any feedback? Yes.
Is this new formatting for the work program? Because didn't you all used to have sort of like a long list of all the permits and applications?
So this isn't the actual work program. This is just a memo with some excerpted stuff. The real work program was revamped last year and it is now, well, as of this current year, is in a different format than it previously was. So you will see the pretty format in April when this comes back to you all.
Cool.
This is just a verbiage.
All right. Thank you. And this is great. And there is a lot. You are very busy. I'm curious, the DPS, Growth Management Coordination, could you just elaborate a little bit more on that?
Sure, that is,
That is a project that the growth management team worked on this year. There were, I think, 3 separate actions. One was about updating the student generation rates. And so you've probably noticed recently at council, there was some questioning and, Aaron said, yeah, the rates actually went down a little bit because we worked with DPS to refine and use their numbers. So that was one of the actions. The other was, and Aaron may need to, he's still here. Yes, he is. Looking at, there was an action about refining the process for school proffers. And so we had several meetings with DPS talking about, okay, if we are to get school proffers, how do we want to handle the, land donation proffers? How do we want to handle those? Sorry, I should have clarified. Where are you looking for land so that we as staff can keep an eye out? So we have a process kind of worked out with them now. We are waiting to hear from them on where they're looking for land. That's kind of the last piece missing, but we have a process now that we are putting in place for staff to work through on applications. Let's see, did I miss something? No, and so then, yeah. Yeah.
The fiscal impact analysis tool update is pretty much done. Andy Lester was our primary person on that, worked with BMS on getting that updated and I guess streamlined and improved.
But there's still some discussions with DPS about improving processes of communication collaboration on.
Go ahead.
Well, we meet with them regularly, and they recently did a series of presentations, to you all, to the board, the school board, and the county commissioners and the city council. And so that is kind of an ongoing conversation that we are continuing to have. And like these numbers, this isn't just a one-time thing, but this is the first time it had been done in a really long time. But our intention is to keep this updated, and we're having, I would say we probably meet at least quarterly-ish with them or so. Yeah.
Yeah.
We send them data all the time that they use to populate their projections. So people.
Yeah, and so for example, on the student generation numbers and the capacity numbers at each school, that's something we're going to be updating annually. DPS will be updating its module on, or I'm sorry, its formula on an annual basis, and then we'll be using the 20th attendance day numbers and updated capacity numbers to make those calculations. So you'll see those change on a yearly basis where previously we were using some relatively old numbers on those.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Your work on that. We had a little zoning case on Monday, Mount Moriah, and I think it opened up some questions about that entire area. I don't know what the answer is, but it's obviously something that is on everyone's radar screen now. And I think Mayor Pro Tem Milton was right when he mentioned that there's development pressure there. I mean, just the fact that we got that rezoning application shows that there's development pressure there. So I love to say let's do a plan there, but we already
I think we gave Scott and Kayla enough work as it is, maybe.
Yeah. So I'm just throwing that out there. I don't know what the answer is, but there's obviously some pressure for some process out there. Sorry, I don't have a solution.
Yeah, I don't say, I don't know that I know either. It'll have to be cross-jurisdictional. That'll be something we'll need to reach out to our partners over in Orange County to figure out how we want to go forward. And
Yeah.
I'm not aware that those discussions have begun yet, but they probably need to.
Yeah, I think that's an upcoming conversation.
Yeah.
So, yeah, go ahead.
On that one, as those conversations unfold, it is really critically important for staff in both areas to pay attention to what's happening on transit there. There's been a lot in that space in the last 2 years with the MPO, which is now Triangle West instead of DCHC MPO, to confuse people even more. Because what ultimately ends up happening on 15501 is just going to have a huge impact on everything around that. And I know sometimes sometimes we miss the ball on transit talking to planning and vice versa. And now we've got several jurisdictions that have to talk to each other as well. And so whatever comes forward, that it's critical that we think about that.
I serve on the technical committee for the MPO, and I know the folks over there, and I'm in regular conversation with Doug and Colleen and his team. So we'll make sure that we're informed of all those developments moving forward.
I was just going to say that, this area, and I think also the area around Highway 70, right? There's definitely, I think, going to come a point in time where we say, hey, we need to spend some small area planning time on this. One of the conversations Scott and I had this year was, for instance, around Highway 70, like we don't yet know exactly, nothing has been solidified. So we need to wait a little bit to things gel a little bit more so we know kind of what we're planning around and for and with. And I think that's kind of the situation here as well.
And it doesn't affect what you have right now. Well, I guess it does with the Garrett Road in particular, which I guess is getting moved to next year. But that residents really need to advocate in NCDOT spaces, right? It can't just be to planning staff when we come do small area planning. It has to go to the level of power where it needs to sit, because a lot of those decisions are not being made locally.
And I'll just add, I mean, there is the opportunity now because we are doing the next phase of the 70 plan that's gone out for an RFP. We're working on 15501 plan. So, we've over and over again, we're talking about how the built environment, it has to be integration of land use and transportation. So, yeah. I just want to mention 12 years ago, when I first started as a county commissioner, we used to have a Durham, Orange, Chapel Hill work group. And so related to how do you talk about something like Mount Moriah, we used to have a work group between folks. So I don't know, just wanted to throw that out. You need to go back, Scott. You need to go back. I wanted to follow up on Councilmember Baker's conversation around the schools.
Okay.
If that could be shared out also with the whatever you all finalize, because we don't get to see a lot of that. It could, because it's part of the the planning reports.
Mhm.
But whatever you all have, whatever tool that or assessment you're using now, or you've finalized, if that could be shared with us, because I just, there was conversation about making sure that, for instance, the cost that the county pays for the additional local per student funding is also reflected in that. I don't know if that is, but yeah.
It
So
is.
it would be just good for us to see where you all came out on that assessment. Yeah, if that could be shared.
So the generation rates are something like, that's not a thing, that's DPS, creates this rate that they refine every year, and then we use that to just generate a number. So I'm not sure there's anything really shareable there
Yeah.
that would make sense, right? It's a spreadsheet that numbers get popped into depending on the project. We do, there is a section of zoning staff reports that includes the information, and what we can do is we can pull a snippet out from a case
be great.
and email it out so you can see what's included in terms of the other change that I forgot to mention is that DPS, went to regions. And so now I think our school capacity stuff is done by regions per.
The student generation rates are done by region.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, that would be helpful to see.
Yeah, so there's a different formula
Yeah.
for the student generation rate depending on
Depending on the
which
region.
region you're in.
I think we're going to talk about it at the next week at Joint City County Planning Committee, but, Joint City County meeting. But, the schools have requested a city county DPS, infrastructure working group of staff, to kind of really zone in on some of the issues. And I think one that's really come up now is the school responsibility zones. That's like an immediate issue. And my question is, how might that affect planning now? Because if we are going to have these walk zones, the responsibility zones around schools, how is that going to now impact with, for development, thinking about how are those kids actually going? And this gets into really safe routes to schools, but it's happening now that we're hearing, well, there needs to be a traffic light here, or there needs to be a crosswalk here, or a sidewalk here for kids to actually get to school. Now, this is going to be a requirement. So just this, I'm just throwing this out as this is actually a new issue we're going to have to all work together on. And it may come back to impacting things like rezonings and whatever, the new UDO. I didn't know if that was on your radar. No, okay.
No, but it can be now.
Yeah, no, I think the school issue is so important because obviously for decades, we have built schools on very large sites, completely oriented around automobiles and built neighborhoods around them the same way. And I think it's time that we integrate all of our processes to re-centralize our schools and celebrate them as civic spaces and make them more accessible and walkable. And I think the immediate concerns around walk zones, that all points to the fact that we need that built environment moving forward that does that kind of thing. Two more questions. Fayetteville Street corridor, I was just curious, was there a reason that didn't end up on the small area plan list?
Yeah, so there is a lot of work already underway, Fayetteville Street corridor. We are not trying to redo work that is already underway. That is a very complicated process that has a lot of players, including nonprofit players at play. So I've had that conversation with the administration. And I think we all felt that it was unnecessary because essentially that same work is already happening.
Okay, that's kind of what I expected to hear. Member Caballero, sorry. You mentioned earlier about this Duke housing group. Could you elaborate a little bit more? And the reason why I'm asking is just because we've had this conversation around thinking holistically about a comprehensive housing plan. So I wanted to ask you, in thinking about a comprehensive housing plan, what kind of work is happening with this Duke group that you mentioned?
Yes, so the large housing initiative actually met yesterday, and two folks from the Duke Housing Council gave us an update as a big group, partly because some of that work overlaps. And the one thing that they are talking about there is a mapping tool that they're creating, thinking about publicly held land and other large parcels. And so there's a lot of conversation on where something like that should live. There's a little bit of concern about living on a government dashboard because of accessibility to that. So that's already been raised as a kind of cautionary, like other communities have done that, and then it can just lead to land speculation. And so that has been that's one of the things that they're working on. But that is separate from the larger kind of housing initiative group that launched in the fall. I don't know if that helps solve or answer some of your question. So there's like some cross pollination of groups. So there's a UDO land use subcommittee, and some of those folks are also on the Duke Housing Council, so that there's always kind of conversations happening across groups and people aren't duplicating work or effort. And then the other piece to that is the HRNA housing needs assessment is expected to be done in early April, I think, was the final due date, which will help inform a lot of, it will be helpful to planning to have that information. Again, there is a lot of conversation on where does that kind of information live? And is it the city, is it the county, right? So that's a question that we haven't answered yet. And there is concern around, we want it to be accessible to nonprofit housing folks or folks who want to build affordable housing, but we don't want it to be tools that can then be used for, development in a way that doesn't really align with our goals.
Okay, that's helpful. So there are a lot of moving pieces there. And okay, so HRNA is doing a sort of comprehensive look at existing conditions for housing. I think that's going to be very, very helpful.
Yeah, and the county, the city, and the Chambers Foundation paid for that housing needs assessment.
Okay, great. All right. The last thing I'll say, and yeah, well, I wanted to just ask that question because I have been interested in looking holistically at housing in Durham because it is such a segmented good. And what are the existing conditions? There's a lot of conversation and speculation, and just being able to paint an accurate picture that HRNA study is going to be very important. And as part of that, I am interested in streamlining this process of the proffers and making that as easy as possible. And also potentially tying that in with the community land trust. I've had some conversations where there's been confusion on the side of developers. Sometimes there's been even confusion on the side of folks who are nonprofits who are receiving some of those units around that process. And if there's anything that we can do to help streamline that process and make it really easy, I think that would be something that would be important for us to tackle. And then the last thing I'll say is you have a ton of stuff on your work program. It's a lot of work. It's really, really exciting. And also, I think just frequent communication about where projects are, the limitations, staff challenges, staff needs, augmentation needs, additional resources. I think that we just need to continue having that conversation because this is great work. I'm really excited about everything. And we just need to make sure that it's well done, and that you aren't putting too much on your plate that it can't be done very, very well. So let's just keep having that conversation and go from there. So thank you.
Thank you. And I just want to be mindful of the time. I just had two comments and / questions around the proposed projects for FY26. One, in terms of the Durham County Open Space Plan, I'm assuming that is city and county, that city and county folks are working together on that. Okay. I also want to highlight that I'm really thrilled about that because there are also opportunities to, I think we always need to be looking for connections and integration for things like the goals, Falls Lake rules and the Upper Neuse River Basin Association, which Aaron and I are both on that. There are opportunities, for instance, the city of Raleigh has invested in our open space. So having properties that are identified in the city and the county also really opens up ways to move, for others to help us achieve our goals and for implementing the IAIA, which is the way that we've been, trying to meet new innovative ways to meet those goals. And I'm also thinking about, again, we are doing a wildlife corridor plan in transportation, identifying wildlife corridors because they are also can be very dangerous, for traffic. So I think I just wanted to also point out our big Durham City County bike ped plan that obviously aligns with this. So I think we're very exciting and just always want to make sure that we're keeping all of the stakeholders involved. And then related similarly to the multimodal traffic impact analysis, perfect timing with this as we're, updating our MTP, again, all the other planning that we're doing, Vision Zero, bike ped. This is so important, our UDO, that this is really, really important. And so very grateful that you all are making this a priority. I want to echo what Councilmember Baker said. Please let us know if you need additional support moving forward. And any other comments or questions before we adjourn? Anything from you, Sarah?
Just a little point of privilege. We have a new employee with us that I want to recognize and just introduce to y'all, if you don't mind, real quick at the end of the meeting. Jay Butts. He is working in our development services team. And so we welcome him. You've been here, I was about to say about a week. So
Thank you for the announcement. And I'm going to put Travis on the spot because you all had a big accomplishment this week out in RTP. You want to just share that very quickly?
Thanks, Wendy. Hi, everyone. Travis Creighton with the Research Triangle Park Foundation. You may have seen the news last Friday, working through our RTP 3.0 long-range plan process. The first major milestone in that was to have our RTP Owners and Tenants Association of Companies vote on changing our land covenants. That vote happened last Friday, and it was overwhelmingly approved by those companies. So we'll continue to coordinate with Sarah and the planning staff to make sure that the pieces of the UDO rewrite that apply to RTP align with that planning process. So we're very excited to hit that milestone. We have more work to do, but that first critical step has been achieved. So thank you, Wendy.
Congratulations. I know there was a lot of hard work that went into that. Thank you. And with that, it's 12 o'clock and we are adjourned.